Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, and welcome to today's Modern Sales Pros Masterclass on scaling revenue from 5 to 25 million. My name is Richard Scrow, and I'm really excited to bring this program forward with the founder of Rose Garden, Ali Mirza. And Ali, this is your first time being on a panel and being on an event with MSP. We have kind of a tradition here. Before we jump into the programming, I have to ask you, man, have you picked up any new hobbies or refined any existing hobbies during this pandemic?
Oh, that's Oh, no. The answer to that is yes. I have gotten into Peloton.
Peloton.
Yeah, so I don't know if you'd call that a hobby or anything, but like right around February, before this whole pandemic thing kind of really took off and got popular, my wife and I, we just bought a Peloton just because it was cool, and then the gyms and everything just shut down, and I was like, oh, good thing we got it when we got it, and so I have been very consistent on my Peloton almost every day. So that's the little thing. I don't. That's not really a hobby though. It was more of a replacement for the gym to go to the Peloton. But
I think, I mean, it could be a hobby. Do you challenge your wife or do you challenge like other people that you work with? Like, how is it integrated into the household? Which is, I think, as interesting a question as the Peloton itself.
so I use it to bike. My wife uses it to put stuff on. I swear she does not use it. She tells me she uses it while I'm at work, but I don't know if that's the case. So internally between the two of us, no, there is no competition, no challenge happening. But I'm not like a part of like the community or anything like that. Like I get into it. I usually just find someone that's probably older and slower than I am on Peloton on the leaderboard, and then I just go and hunt them down. Because you need those little wins in life where you beat someone up that's not at your level. Sometimes it's like the longest yard where they played against the junior college teams.
Right.
So 5 a.m. first thing in the morning. That's usually what I'm doing is chasing down somebody else.
That's good. That's good. I think that's also it's a good way to stay fit too during the pandemic. I know some folks have done in terms of spiffs, right, for organizations. Top biller gets a Peloton. So you've already got those competitive juices going. They challenge the executive team and so on. That's great. And I think the other part on that too, does the Peloton is it just biking or is there a training component with that as well?
They have other things, so I think
the
Peloton there, like the screen will swivel. I don't have the new one. And then they've got the little weights and stuff where you can do yoga and stretching and all this other stuff. I don't mess around with that. I get on there and I actually put the people on mute because I don't enjoy their motivation. And so I just
get in the zone and go.
Well, yeah, usually I'm either like listening to a podcast or something like that. So it's kill two birds with one stone type of deal for me.
That's some good multitasking right there. For folks that are just commenting on, we're going to give folks just another minute to kind of get in and get settled here. We've launched a poll. So today we're talking about scaling revenue from 5 to 25 million with Ali Mirza from Rose Garden. What's going to really help Ali and I shape this conversation is two things. First, go ahead and answer that poll. That's going to help us understand where our audience is. Secondly, as we're going through our conversation today, this is meant to be interactive. If you have a question, a thought, go ahead and throw that in the Q&A panel. And Ali and I, behind the scenes, we'll figure out how we want to address that. Maybe we're going to answer it live. Ali may want to follow up afterwards with some programming, or we may just actually answer it right in the chat panel there. But folks, we're going to actually jump into today's Modern Sales Pros Masterclass on scaling revenue from 5 to 25 million. Before I give Ali a chance to introduce Rose Garden and himself, just a few words about Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who don't know, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest community for revenue leaders. So it's for folks in sales management roles, sales and revenue operations, sales enablement, and the related supporting disciplines. The goal of our community is to create an environment where our members can ask and answer questions that they'd otherwise struggle to solve on their own. And we do that through robust online discussions, kind of like the nerdiest version of Reddit that you've ever seen. And we also do that by bringing great speakers into conversations like Ali to share their perspective and expertise with the community about issues that are topical. One of the great parts about MSP is when you ask a question, it's not just getting a perspective from one or two people. We have about 20,000 members across 5,000 organizations. So you may get perspective from a high growth SaaS company and an established unicorn or duocorn or even bigger. But for those of you who aren't members, you will get a chance to join and you'll be invited to the community afterwards. Enough about us. Today's programming wouldn't be possible without the sponsorship from the team at Rose Garden. I'm going to hand it off to their founder, Ali Mirza, to say just a few words about Rose Garden Consulting. Ali?
Thank you, Richard. Effectively, Rose Garden, we are here first and foremost to further the sales community. Our goal is to help organizations, particularly the sales side of an organization, scale effectively and efficiently using not tired best practices, but using appropriate principles that will scale the organization. And a lot of what we do is rooted in behavioral economics. And so effectively our goal is to work with organizations that, got a little bit going, and what they're really looking to is systematize their process, hone in on their hiring process, and then scale and ramp their reps, work on comp structures, things of that nature, anything and everything to effectively develop a turnkey sales department. That's what we're here for.
And we're excited to have somebody with such great perspective. Ali, before we jump into this, I want to say a reminder to our audience, two things. First and foremost, today's session will be recorded. So if you got to hop out, don't worry, you're going to get a copy of the recording after our session. And then secondly, this is meant to be interactive. Ali and I can talk for hours and hours and hours on end on this. If that's good for you, great. If you've got a burning question, do throw it in the Q&A panel. You can also upvote questions. So if there's a great question in there, it's pretty close to the one that you want, go ahead and give it an upvote, and that will ensure that Ali and I see it. But Ali, thanks again for the sponsorship. Thanks for some background on Rose Garden. Tell us about yourself. How did you get going with Rose Garden? How did you get into revenue strategy?
Well, I think, through and through, I'm a salesperson at heart. And I think I started in sales pretty much like how everyone starts in sales, by accident. Nobody grows up wanting to be a salesperson. So I remember I was in university, and I was approaching summer, and I needed a summer job, and met one of my high school friends, and he was selling insurance at the time. And I'm glad I didn't know then what I know now. But I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's go and do this, because he invited me to work a part of his team. And so started selling insurance door to door. So I was the guy I'd knock on your door. You'd never seen me before, never saw me again. But no appointments, no nothing. You just show up, right? And so I did that for 4 years, going door to door. And I eventually, worked up my way through the ranks from selling insurance to managing and leading a team while still selling on a pad. I had up to, I think at one point I had over 50 reps that were directly reporting to me. So it was one of those models where, you build up a team and you get overrides and residuals because it was 100% commission. And so did that for about 4 years. And eventually, you get to a point where you're just like, this is not what I'm going to do long term. I cut my teeth, learned what I needed to learn, and got pretty much what I could get out of there. From there, I moved into actually starting Rose Garden. So that was going on nine years now. So that was 9 years ago. I left insurance and started Rose Garden. And effectively, we started off. We actually started out as a outsourced hired gun, right? So you had a product service solution to sell, but you didn't want to run a sales team. So we would actually just come in there and then just sell. So you put us on retainer, we sell, then you pay us a kicker when we, close the deal for you. I was working out great. We did that for about 3 years or so until one of my clients said, this is great and all, but Ali, if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, we're back to square one. And then what I wanted to say was, well, that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem.
I'm not worried about it if I got hit by a bus. That's the least of my concerns.
I'm done. I got other problems at that point. So actually, luckily I said, well, why don't you, or actually then he proposed, he said, well, why don't you write down everything you do? I was like, why don't you pay me for that? And we actually struck a deal where I sat down and wrote out and built out the entire process, and script, word for word, everything. And then I just kind of, that's when the kind of the light bulb went off, and that's ultimately where we pivoted, 5-6 years ago, whatever it was now. And we just went into started building out processes for organizations. And so that's effectively what we've been doing since then, is writing scripts, building out playbooks, developing tech stacks, depending on, your ideal client, depending on your sales cycle, depending on everything. Effectively we come in there and kind of stand up a sales team for you, and parachute in and then leave once got it rolling.
And I think one of the parts that's exciting about having Ali joining us here is the perspective is so strategic, right? You've done this a bunch of times, and you've seen the run work, and you've seen the run kind of go off the rails. So let's actually jump into our conversation here today. And again, for our audience, this is a combination of topics that Ali and I came up with to discuss that are relevant to scaling your business, and questions that came in during registration. But if you have something live that you want to make sure that we get, please do go ahead and throw that out there. And interestingly enough, Ali, if we look, the majority of folks that are here today are in that $1 to $10 million range. So a lot of practical advice that we'll be able to provide today. But jumping into it, I mean, let's talk about first principles here. And we picked the 5 to 25 zone for a bunch of reasons, but you've seen this a bunch of times. Why is this so difficult? Why do companies kind of flame out in this 5 to 25 hurdle?
I think that, and this is going to actually be a little bit contrary to the first principles concept, but it's the kind of the old adage that success is not usually the best teacher, or sometimes is not the best teacher. And so what we've learned is that first million, it's just a hustle, it's a grind. You're doing 100 different things. You're just trying to make a buck, right? $50 is $50 at that point. But once you kind of get to that point, once you're at $1 million, you're starting to refine certain things, and you're trying to build systems, you're trying to build processes. But really, at the end of the day, it's an elevated, graduated hustle, is what it boils down to, because you can get up to that 5 million. If you are a strong enough salesperson, or if you have enough, market demand and certain things. But that's where, you're not necessarily learning what potentially your clients are actually buying from you, or like I said, if there's unmet demand and you're just filling that demand, well, they may be buying for one particular reason, and you're reinforcing a different narrative in your head. Well, they bought because of this reason. No, they just bought because there was no other competition. Or they bought because of whatever particular reason. So whatever that may be. It's once you get to that 5 million, that those tactics are not necessary, and that's what they are, is tactics. They're not necessarily going to help you kind of cross that, because that initial cream off the top, you have skimmed, and now you're going to have to be more strategic. And that's really where you have to kind of go back to that first principle and that core reason, and as to why they purchased, or why other people will purchase. Because I mean, and that's really one of the kind of the founding principles of behavioral economics, which is why people do what they do. Everyone knows about the kind of the elephant. You're familiar with the elephant.
I think for folks who aren't familiar, I'm familiar with it, but just probably give a restate of that.
Yeah, let me. So basically, what it boils down to is like it's this elephant on the rider, right? So there's a person sitting on top of an elephant, and so there's 3 phases, or 3 ways you can kind of interpret this. There's the say data, the do data, the why data. So the say data is what people say, right? So if you interpret, if you poll your people, your current clients, customers, they'll tell you, well, I bought because of this. That is similar to when the rider is sitting on top of the elephant saying, go north, right? And if the elephant goes north, great, right?
Everybody wins.
Exactly. But that's you telling, that's you saying. The do data is really, the actual elephant doing and actually going north, because a lot of times you can say go north, but then the elephant could go south, right? And then there's the why data. Why did the elephant go north, right? And that's really what it boils down to. And there's usually a disconnect between what we say versus what we do. And it's really a function of post-rationalization. So meaning, someone purchased from you, they're not going to, 9 times out of 10, I will assure you, they're not going to say, I honestly don't know why I bought it. I honestly bought it just so my founder would back off, right? I know plenty of people that purchase SaaS solutions, and check yourself on this. I mean, you're going to be like, oh no, everyone loves my product. Check yourself. Look at the usage. How many times do people buy and then they get onboarded and then the usage just starts to drop off, right? That right there, that if you analyze that and understand that, that is what's going to help you get from 5 to 25 million as to why are they dropping off. So the simple answer is do the reverse, right? Make them not drop off. And this is why customer success is so important. That stickiness, making that usage is very important. Once you understand that you just take that and bring it further up the funnel to the sales conversations. And that's what's going to promote the actual sales. And you don't have that information until you have a group of clients or customers. I would say clients because I'm in consulting, but customers, until you have a group of customers that you're actually, that are using your solution. That's why it's so difficult, is because people don't have those conversations properly. They've been reinforced by poor data points. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that totally makes sense. And are you familiar with Drift and the story of David Cancel? Have you heard this one before, Ali, about this exact kind of understanding your customer base really, really well?
No, I've not heard this story. No.
So this is a point, and I think it lines up nicely with what you're saying. David Cancel, as he was getting started with Drift, and now Drift is at the time was $25 per person per seat. He would actually fly from Boston to sit on site with his first 50 customers to just figure out what the heck they were doing with it. Mm-hmm. And that was the early unscalable thing that he did to be able to really make sure he could understand that. And then to Ali's point, codify it, put it up in the marketing material or in the sales process or whatever it might be.
Okay, and by the way, I love David. Okay, so, and I love Drift, and I think how reasonable is that, right? David, what was that? Drift is what, his 4th, 5th startup, right? Exit, or 3 exits before that. Homeboy's sitting on a couple billion, right? Like, he can fly places. You can't. I don't care. Like, you just can't, right? Like, it's not going to happen. So you got to think about a different way of, principally what he is doing is understanding why, right? Can that be done without,
going on site? Yep.
Right? And
no,
it's a privilege he had, which good for him. He should exercise that. But we need to figure out, okay, that's the principle, is learning. The tactic was flying. So what in your situation would be the tactic to learn?
No, I think that, and I think it's a great point. It's a good example of that. So let's keep going here. Let's talk about some of these things. So what, we've talked a little bit about from a strategy standpoint, from a hiring standpoint. I mean, at this point, you're hiring, right? I'm not just running a $25 million company with 4 or 5 people in a garage. What's the role of hiring in scaling?
I would I would argue that hiring is the most important part of this, but then right under there it talks about leadership, which that's probably more important, because you have the best people in poor leadership, and it's going to be a catastrophe. But so hiring, it's so multifaceted in the sense that you can have the wrong salespeople, and then they're not selling anything, and then the rest of your team, it's oxygen, right? And then the rest of your team suffocates. You have the right salespeople, but you have the wrong, customer success or onboarding people, or you have the wrong delivery engineering team, and then your good salespeople feel, oh, well, what's the point of selling it? It's a countdown to when it drops anyways, and then I get clawed back, right? And it's just like, so there's so many different things, but so hiring is incredibly important. For the purposes of this conversation, we're going to only talk about the sales side, but just understand that I am not blind to thinking that you can hire perfectly on the sales side, and if the rest of your hiring process is broken, it almost doesn't matter. So here's what I will say. You can go fast, but you can't go far, right? And scaling a team is all about your people, because I don't care what you say, whatever problem you have, if you trace it back far enough, it begins with the person. Now, to that, no matter what solution you come up with, if you trace that back far enough, that is also a person. So to be able to recruit and bring in the right individuals is very important, but it's not just about having the right person. It's also about having the right person in the right seat. Now, so internally here at Rose Garden and with all of our clients, now, I don't want to call it a shameless plug, but I mean, just in the interest of being transparent, we are Kolbe and Print certified, which is, Kolbe is the cognitive side of how people work, right? So the how they work, and then Print is the affective side, the why, you know, their motivations. So that's what we rely upon as people's Kolbe and Print scores. But just understand that that's not the be all end all. That's not the other way, right? I mean, there's DISC, there's Myers-Briggs. I mean, it's all about just being able to interpret, you know, those scores. But there's core. I mean, there's a whole bunch of those tests out there. For us personally, it's about Kolbe and Print. That's what we utilize. And for us, specifically on the sales side, we've noticed that there are particular types of individuals that do well in sales versus particular types of people that don't do well in sales, right? So just to give you an example, you know, practical example, you know, you're interviewing a salesperson, or you're interviewing anybody, you know, you ask your standard questions. You know, what's your biggest strength? What's your biggest weakness? Well, I'll tell you what I used to tell people in interviews what my biggest weakness was. My biggest weakness was that I care too much. I'm a workaholic.
I work too hard, rats.
You know, that's my biggest weakness. What kind of, I'm not supposed to swear, right? Or keep it, you said PG-13? Like
my mom listens, so let's keep it PG-13. So yeah, what kind of BS is that?
Exactly. It's just like, come on now. Like, so my whole thing is like, you know, it's like the Google test. Like the interview should really be like, you know, can I stand being in a airport with this person, right? You should know pretty darn well whether or not this person can or cannot do the job before you sit down with them to have that face-to-face interview, because otherwise you're just wasting your time. So for us, what we look for, you know, can they do the job? For the Kolbe score, we're looking for individuals that are relatively lower on the fact finding and then higher on the quick start. That's who I am. I'm lower fact finder and higher on the quick start. What that effectively means is that I can make decisions in situations of great uncertainty. I move quickly, I'm nimble, I'm dynamic. So give you an example. Someone wants to walk in here today and give me a piece of paper with a bunch of questions, say, Ali, you've got 100 people over here. I need you to walk around and ask every single person a question. I'm like, oh, great, free day. I don't have to work, right? I can just go and have fun. That is what I call a dynamic situation. Now you flip that around to somebody that is high fact finder, high follow through, low quick start, and you give them that same exact task, activity, they're sitting there thinking, why am I being punished? Like, I've got all this work to do. Why am I asking these questions? They're asking all these types of questions. Now, which type of person is going to translate to sales well? The individual that, you know, and this is not about positivity and glass half full, glass half empty. No. That's affective. This is the cognitive. This is what makes them successful. So you need to have the right people playing a role inside of your organization. And only then when you give them the tools, will they be successful with it. But if you have the wrong people in the wrong seats, it could be a great person that's well-meaning, but they just don't function in that appropriate way. It's not going to work well. So hiring is incredibly important. Because that 5 to 25 million, it's not going to be done by you. It's not going to be done by the founder or the VP of sales. It's going to be done through other people, and you need to multiply. I'm speaking from a founder's perspective, but I need to multiply my efforts through others. I need to scale a team and have every single person bringing in whatever it is, whatever their quota is, $200,000, $300,000 a month, opposed to, you know, one person that's playing, you know, hero ball and can bring in $500,000 a month. That's great, but I'd probably rather have 10 people that bring in 300 rather than one person that brings in 500.
Well, and that's something too, where there's a level of self-awareness that you have, and you've seen this movie enough times before. And I'm going to bring us into our last point here. What role does leadership play in this? And maybe if you can flip this a little bit into not just the role that leadership plays, and it's important, but maybe some practical advice for folks that may be sitting in the, oh, I'm on this run now. How should I think about it? How should I behave as a leader, whether I'm a VP of sales or a CRO or a CEO?
I'm going to give probably some contradictory advice that I think half the people are just going to be like, F this guy and log off. but your job as a leader is you are a puppet master. If you cannot control your people, if you do not, I mean, I can use flowery language and say it's to motivate and inspire. And don't get me wrong, it absolutely is that. But if you do not know your people, if you do not know what makes them tick, if you don't understand when they're having a good day versus when they're having a bad day, and how to light a fire under them, and when do you apply the pressure versus when do you not apply the pressure, if you don't understand, and this word gets a bad rap, but how to manipulate the situation, right? You're not manipulating them, right? It's not with malice intent, but most of the time people just, they don't know thyself, right? Most people don't know themselves, and left to their own devices, they're probably not going to do what you need them to do. Your job as a leader is to get the best out of them. And so in order to get the best out of them, sometimes you have to play some mind games. You have to, but you have to know, will playing mind games with this person even work, right? Because there's some people that's going to be a complete turnoff. Versus, I've got some people on my sales team, myself in particular, I am hyper competitive, right? And we know this through my affective scores. But I'm the type of person that if you come up to me and be like, hey, Ali, Tommy over there just sold this deal. I don't think you can do it, right? That is going to light a fire for me, versus with somebody else, it's just going to be a complete turnoff. So know your people and push those buttons. And my leadership style, I am literally the most transparent leader that ever. And here's me going to my Trump speech. I'm the most transparent person on the planet. I literally tell every single one of my salespeople, I play favorites. If you do the right things, you will get literally the better leads, the better contact forms that come in. Versus if I see you screwing around, you're ahead of quota, and you're like, oh, I can take my foot off the gas pedal. This is not a democracy. This is a meritocracy. I will feed people that actually want it. And because we all do that anyways. So just be transparent about that. That keeps them sharp. That keeps them, I don't care how ahead of quota I am, how ahead of quota I am not. What am I supposed to be doing? Trust the process they need to do. It's Bill Belichick, right? Do your job, period. Just do your job. Everyone has a role to play. There are, I forget who it was that said it, but the old, there are no small parts, only small actors type of thing, right? Like every single person that's here plays an integral role. I don't care, what your title is. Every single person plays an integral role. And if I cannot control every single individual and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, that is a failure of me as a leader. If I see them doing something that they shouldn't be doing, or if they're off track, it is irresponsible of me not to say something.
No, I think that's really, really salient advice, and I don't think that's necessarily counter to what we've discussed in other avenues with MSP. I think it's very important to understand how to put your team in the position to be successful. And the surprising part, a lot of folks with Bill Belichick, I love that example. A lot of folks think he's this mad genius, but if you listen to people who've played for him, he makes their job as simple and as clear, and success is black or white. Did you do the thing? Even though he's one of the greatest coaches ever, but he's a great coach because he can break that down into a very simple, the linebacker does this thing in this situation. And it's easy to read and react.
That is first principles. Plain and simple.
I love it. Ali, we could talk about this stuff for forever here. I want to move a little bit into some of the specifics around growing pains. And one of the ones, and there was this question came in a lot on hiring. One of the first questions that came in when we were kind of getting up the registration for this was, when I'm hiring, how do I know and how do I make sure I hire the right VP of sales? And I know we chatted about this in prep, but it came up a couple times in registration. So when you're consulting with companies, how do you make sure that they are set up to hire the right sales leader?
Well, I can tell you all the wrong ways to hire someone. So here's what I will say. There is no magic bullet. There is no perfect way to do it. So if you're looking for that, I'm sorry, there is no perfect way. I think that a lot of it depends on a whole host of factors. One thing I will tell you, experience is important. Proof that they can do the job is important. But I think a lot of times the mistake that we make is that we think time equates experience. No, time, tenure, in a role creates habits. It doesn't. I've met plenty of people that were at their job for 20 years that were very, very bad at their job. So just because someone has 20 years of sales experience does not mean that they were a good salesperson. And so I think I'll tell you the other thing that's a huge red flag to me always is if they are very concerned about the title itself. A true sales leader, a true good salesperson does not care. Like just they're going to be more concerned about the money that they can make. And I know we can all, like guys, look, if people, I shouldn't say guys, gals, people, like salespeople want to make money. They should be coin operated. Your sales, so they're going to want a good base, but their upside should also be there as well. So their OTE they should care about. But if they're, strictly 100% base, that's a big red flag. But if they're strictly like, I want a VP of sales title, that's also a huge red flag. So what I have seen be successful in the past is I have seen salespeople, I've seen sales leaders who work out are the ones that still enjoy selling. I have seen sales leaders that are great salespeople, but their motivations are geared all around seeing other people grow. So that is kind of been, the only real kind of telling feature of a successful salesperson, sales leader, let's call it, whether it be a VP of sales, director of sales, whatever. They're not concerned about titles. They're not concerned about all these other things. They are concerned about being paid off of their team because they care about money. But they are usually strong and self-reliant, as well as they have a need to be needed and appreciated. And that's kind of that. And this is print. This is the print assessment. So the score is 8.2, which lines up very much with the Enneagram. So if any of you are familiar with that. So anyone that is very strong and self-reliant, that wants to do things on their own, and then also wants to see others grow. That, from an affective side, tells you about their motivations. And then if they can sell and they understand strategy and they can have higher level conversations, that person will likely has a chance at being a good sales leader. Pretty much anything and everything else is probably going to be a red flag. But if anyone has any specific questions, I can probably go into that, but that's kind of the best I can do right now.
No, I think that's kind of a great overview. And if folks have questions, hiring a first VP of sales, you want to get that right. Ali, another question that came up a bunch during registration, and for folks that are in organizations that are kind of hitting growth, how does the profile of a seller change as you're scaling, or does it change as you go from 5 to 25 million?
I would say that the profile of your salespeople can change. Mm-hmm. I would say it does not depend upon what stage you are as a company necessarily. I think it would depend more upon who it is that you are selling to. So, the example I can give is, right, if you go from, being a scrappy startup dealing with small businesses to all of a sudden, you raise a few rounds and you starting to solidify your place in the market, and you realize that enterprise is where you need to go. It's unlikely that, the people that you had hawking your, $6 a month are going to be the same people that are going to sell, $10 million deal. So I think what you're really looking for is how is who the buyer is and who the ideal client is and organization that you're selling into. If that's changing and that's becoming a little bit more graduated, likely the salespeople that you hire should also start to up level as well. Now that doesn't mean you hire different people, but you just maybe now need to provide more resources and support in order to continue to grow people up and they can, furnish that business acumen.
Yeah, you can skill up the people that you have to a certain point. And I think this actually lines up with the second point. And when we hear this a lot, right? As a company starts to get on this run, maybe they had a mid-market sales motion and they're moving into baby enterprise, or they were in the maybe small enterprise and they're pushing up into a bigger enterprise as part of the transition from 0 to 1 to 5 to 25. Another thing that we know is it can kind of be the Wild West, like you're saying, super scrappy, hustle to get to 5. How have you seen, or what are some common things that you see in go-to-market motions as companies begin to grow, whether that's changes in positioning or changes in the organization structure as a whole?
I think that's very situational dependent. What I can say is, honestly, I think that really depends, and I'm just going to, basically, I'm going to avoid answering this question. I'm pulling a politician here, but I think that's more on marketing and branding. I think that as long as if you are changing markets, yes, there's a lot that needs to be done with your salespeople and whatnot, but I think that if your brand position is not where it needs to be, from the marketing side, and you're not targeting the right people with the right messaging, I think you've got a huge uphill battle. So a simple example I will give is, let's just say tomorrow Volvo decides to build a formula, or wants to create a super fast sports car, right? Like to compete with like a Porsche 911, right? I don't care how fast that car goes, right? People are not going to buy that car, right? Like it could be as fast as a Porsche 911. It's just, no one brags about their Volvo, right? It's just not going to happen. It's just like, sorry.
Not in the Porsche 911 circle, that's for sure.
So I think that it has to do a lot more with brand positioning. So I mean, it's simple heuristics. If it feels right, it's probably right, regardless of whether it's right or not. So I don't know. I know I didn't answer the question. I don't care to.
That's fine. No, I think it's one that we see where some folks have a preconceived notion that to grow revenue, I have to change my market or change my go-to-market motion. And Ali, to your point, it's not necessarily the case. Volvo's doing just fine selling really safe SUVs to parents in New England. Great. They don't need to go into selling sports cars. It would be insane if they did. And I think you're dispelling that notion by saying, look, if you're good at what you're doing and there's room in your total addressable market, keep going. Double, triple down on what works versus trying to dabble in 6 or 7 other things.
Yeah. And again, I don't think you should if you still have room to grow, but I mean, should you do that, you're gonna have to lead with brand first.
Yeah. And I think on this front as well, there's competitors will begin to arise and take notice to you. And one of the things that we can hone in on here, and you can approach this a couple different ways. One question that comes up a lot is, how do I respond to my competitors' pricing? Whether I'm going in and developing a pricing strategy that's market responsive or otherwise, what advice do you give to folks as you're consulting here around just competitive response? And then we can double click into pricing as well.
Yeah, I mean, how do I say this without coming across like a jerk? It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I think the people that are gonna pull up a spreadsheet and go side by side, they're the wrong client for me. I'll tell you that much. And then here someone's gonna be like, well, hey, Ali, you've never sold into a sales department and procurement and this and that. And I'm like, yes, I have. And I have literally sent out RFPs where they said $50,000, $100,000 max budget, and then we go and pitch something for 250 and then win the deal. Reframe that RFP, and it went through procurement, it went through purchasing and legal and finance and everything, and they had to go and it extended the deal. So I'll give an example when it actually happened. We have a client that sold into the legal space, and it hyper commoditized. They were already the leader in terms of from a pricing standpoint. They were already at the highest. People were spending their competitors were charging between $2,000 to $3,000 plus or minus for the service annually, and they were coming in at 12 to 15, somewhere between there. So they're already 3-4x more expensive than their nearest competitor. We went in there and we completely reframed the conversation. We effectively in the pitch said that we have no competitors, and we then listed out key specific points as to what we do that differentiated us from a utilitarian standpoint of what somebody else could do. And we're actually creating the case study around it right now. So if anyone is calling bullshit on this, that's fine. I don't care. Send me an email. I will send you the case study. You can go and verify all the facts on your own. That's fine. It's an Inc. 500, fastest growing company. All the numbers are public. But we took their average sales price from $12,000 annual to $70,000. So this is already somebody that's just juicing the market. And we did that because we reframed the conversation. They were using a very logical sales pitch prior to, that would kind of almost create a little bit of a cross comparison. And then the brand equity was what was allowing them to charge 3 or 4 times more. So it was like, yeah, I'm getting the same thing, but it was the old, nobody ever got fired from buying IBM. That was their positioning. How we completely changed it. The market has not changed. The market's still charging $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. We're now charging 70, and that is what the average sale price is. And we've changed it just by simply having a conversation really geared around emotions and kind of completely changing that, because again, behavioral economics will teach you people make decisions based off of emotion and justify with logic. And any one of you that are saying, oh, hey, again, call them BS, that's fine. Most salespeople do lie. That's fine. I don't care. Aaron Ross and I are actually writing a book specifically about this. It's the follow-up to predictable revenue. It's called Predictable Closing. And we are going to outline exactly what the problem is and why people aren't able to do that, and exactly, how you can go about doing this, because it just price and number, it's vapor. It's made up. I don't care what anyone says. It is made up. I am telling you, value-based pricing. Don't cost it.
I wish this was a conversation over beers live, because this is good. I would reiterate a couple points that Ali made there around responding to competitors. The first is that, and more fundamentally, and I think, Ali, this is why you and I have the strong relationship that we do, sales is about transference of enthusiasm. It's about making an emotional decision. Oh, but Slack doesn't have sales teams, as they'll say, or product-led growth is the way. And that's true to a point from a product design standpoint. But at the end of the day, sales is generally an emotional transference of enthusiasm, where I'm excited to work with Ali. I feel like the solutions, all things being equal, I'm going to work with him, even if it's more expensive. And I think that that's an important part too, coming back to the pricing point, where it's all the value that you associated with. And I used to train my reps on this, where if you heard, oh, it's expensive, relative to what? Well, it just feels like a lot of money. Well, we're going to unlock X, Y, and Z business value, or you're going to get to do A, B, and C with it. What's that worth? And it becomes a different exercise when you start to reframe it, versus it just being like, oh, it's expensive. Well, I'm going to immediately drop my price because you said it was expensive. Like, that's a silly thing to do.
Well, and not to belabor this, but just to add to that, and it depends on who you're speaking to, right? To particular type of individual, particular type of buyer, and depending on the pain points, yes, that's exactly what you should do. In other situations, you want to lean into it, right? I mean, we have a very, I don't know, man, like I probably was I don't know. I definitely wasn't a Buddhist monk in another life, but I just sit on my Peloton, just like my brain goes, right? And so I just have like a very like Bruce Lee, Jeet Kune Do type of style of when it comes to selling. And I'm just very much a counterpuncher. And someone's like, well, that's 10 times more expensive. I'm like, yeah, it is, I'm like, but like, what are you buying there, right? I mean, like, you're getting X, Y, and Z. I mean, is that what you think you're getting here, right? Like, start making them question their own, right? And then be like, well, no. And then be like, okay, well, you do it. You have to show them it. Nobody cares what's better, because your brain cannot tell what's better. Your brain can tell what's different. Separate, create that separation. That's all you need to do. And then they will come to you with more questions. They're not going to buy if they're confused, right? A confused buyer is not a buyer type of situation, right? But it will create curiosity. It will create an open loop in their head. And that they will need to scratch, that itch they will need to scratch. And that's really what you want. And then now you're in a conversation, right? So to me, I'm just a counterpuncher. I want to lure them in. And then once they start asking, and then I'm like, now I have ability to actually sell.
I'm going to ask a follow-on question to that. This one isn't scripted or anything like that. How do you train people to have that kind of Bruce Lee mentality of listening and having the right amount of empathy versus aggressiveness to have that conversation, but foster that loop in your potential buyer? How do you educate on that?
It is painful. Very, very painful. So like, imagine like, any Rocky montage right before he fights his big fight. It is that, but mentally. And the only way to do it, now, I don't care how many books you read, I don't care how many whatever workshops you take, the only way to do it is by listening to your own calls. If you do not record and you do not listen to your own calls, you will never, ever even come close to actualizing your potential. So short answer, all your calls should be recorded. you should listen to them on your own. And then after you've listened, you've taken key notes, and you're just like, oh, did I really say that? I mean, it is going to be the cringiest feeling on the planet, right? It just is. Just get over it. You take notes on your own, and you should have a sales leader that is prepared to invest time in you, that your sales leader has, independent of you, listened to your call and taken notes. And now you both come together and you play that call, right? So it takes a long time, because I mean, now you're effectively, if it's a 30-minute call, you've got two individuals that listen to it. Probably took them about an hour to listen, because you're pausing, taking notes, playing. Gong really helps you do this. I have no affiliation to Gong, but just, it transcribes. I mean, you want to use Chorus, you want to use whoever, I don't care. Jiminy, there's a million people out there. There's tools out there that can help you do this. But people love to just, oh, I've got Gong. They enroll it, and then they look for particular things. Man, that's a half-assed way of doing it. That is cheap. Don't do that. Do it right? Listen to your call, take your own notes, and then once you have that, sit down with your sales leader, or a sales leader should be sitting down with their reps, playing that call, and then now you're explaining it to them. You're telling them, okay, see right there, you said this. They said this, and you responded with this. The words were right, the delivery was wrong. You were too fast, you were too slow. There was not enough emotion behind it. It sounded shady. I didn't believe you, right? You didn't believe yourself, right? So that is the way, and you keep doing that, You listen to game tape. Pros watch game tape, and that's how they get better. You watch the game tape, now you got to go practice it. Don't go on field right away with it. Go and practice it, role play. Watch a role play, and then go. That is the only way you can get better. You can read every single one of these books and not even come close to somebody else that then actually played it. So I'll get off my soapbox right now, but that's how you get better.
I think that that's phenomenal advice, and I think the point, especially around the, and I know you do some consulting with tech stacks and all that. It's a great point. Like, just buying Gong or Chorus or whomever doesn't mean that you're done. That's just the beginning. There's so much that you can do with it to take advantage of it. Ali, we started to talk a little bit about some of the success stories from what you've worked with and some of the common problems that you've seen or that you help folks turn around with. We've got about let's call it 10 minutes or so left. We'll get some questions coming in as well. But really, this is your time to share a couple stories that you've seen that were really like, hey, we made this change. It had set the organization up for success, or kind of flip it and be like, a lot of times I'm brought into an organization to fix problem X. And here's some of the ways that we go about solving for problem X.
I'm gonna take your second question because why wouldn't I? I mean, I'll let everyone else figure out why I wouldn't. Okay, so the second question is that we're typically called in for these types of problems, and this is what we do. Here's one of the problems I've been noticing lately, and it's rep turnover. They have organizations have a very difficult time hiring, and then they're having a difficult time keeping. Because here's what ends up happening. You don't know how to hire, you're hiring from a limited pool, everyone wants too much money. Still right now, somehow everyone still wants too much money because they're making too much money off unemployment, but whatever. So everyone wants too much money. So then you finally dig through your pockets, you hire the person, and either they are not good, you train them, you make them good, or they are bad and then they stay bad, or they are great. Wonderful. Either way, the person that's not good doesn't get better. It's countdown to when they get terminated or leave or whatever, because no one wants to be bad at something and constantly go and get punched in the face. They're good, and then you end up being a jump off where they come to you, they learn, and then they go somewhere else where there's someone else will pay them more, and because they're already trained, or they're good. Keeping reps is very, very important. So it's a dual problem. It's all about accountability. And like I said, training and providing your people. As a leader, your job is to serve. And I'm by no means a subscriber to servant leadership. I don't believe in it, just putting it out there. But nevertheless, your job is to serve your people and make them better. You're there to make them better and serve, frankly, the organization. So that's what you have to do. And so that's one of the problems that we help correct for people. And it really boils down to, okay, like now can we set up these cadences and systems so where you can play back the calls and coach them, and how do you coach them, and creating little worksheets to make it easier, et cetera, et cetera. But then, okay, now you made this person better. how do you not lose them? So I'll give you one example, and this is one example that we've actually used, and there's 10 other ones that I can also give, but this is the funniest one, or makes for the best TV, we'll call it. We had an organization that had a very, very extensive training process, but then they were known for having really good reps, and then people would poach them. And so what we did was we actually built in golden handcuffs inside of the comp. So two things we did. We actually increased the annual bonus because, and you'll learn why we did this in a second. But then we had it paid out in the following quarter, right? Because if you have the annual bonus paid out at the end of the year, right, you can take your bonus and buy, right? I'm out, right? So we always had people, basically they're now a quarter deep on their bonus, and before they get previous year's bonus. Now, that's why we had to increase it, because if we're going to give it to you later, there's got to be something in it for you, not for nothing, right? So we increased it just slightly, but that was able to help with the retention. And then number two, we actually gave all the sales reps a car allowance. And so, and this is why, because we gave them all $950. And again, this funded organization, so they had money, right? So as a startup, you can't do this. I've got other creative ideas for startups, but so they gave them car allowance. Everyone was given, I think it was like $950. You had to prove that that's what your car payment was. And then whatever your car payment was, we'd give you up to $950. So if it was whatever, 600, we only gave 600. What do salespeople do? What do good salespeople do, right? They burn that, right? So their car allowance was 950 or 900, whatever it was. They would go and get S classes for like, and then their car payment was like 1,100, 1,200, right?
I was just thinking what kind of car you could get for $950. I mean, you could get some pretty nice wheels for $950.
You could get some really nice wheels, but then the heart wants what it wants, so it gets you just that much closer to that dream car, right? That Porsche, right? So now they're dreaming in a world that they now want to be in, and so as a result, they would go and spend. They'd be like, whatever, I'll get the full $950, and I'm only out of pocket $200, $300, whatever. Well, on what planet is another company going to be like? They may give you an extra $10,000 base. They may give you a better than a concert. On what planet is another company going to be like, oh yeah, your S-Class will take care of that? Remember, a lot of them were getting leases, or whether they were buying it and having a car payment, but we were only reimbursing up to $950. That money was still coming out of technically their pocket. So if they left, they would be relinquishing that car allowance, and now they're stuck with this bill. Golden handcuffs, we would keep them. So that's one example. So, but nevertheless, culture. Like I could go off on a whole diatribe. I mean, I don't care how much you pay a salesperson. If they hate being there, then they are. And if they're not growing, they don't enjoy the job. They hate you as a leader. I mean, really, one of the biggest problems we do solve is, getting reps better, making them better, creating processes and systems around making sure that it's not just a fluke that you invested all this time. It is repeatable. But then you got to keep those people, and that's one of the things that we really want to focus on is how do we keep reps? And there's culture, there's pay, there's career paths, there's so many things that you can do rather than I don't know. I went off on a tangent.
No. I think you hit on a lot of really good points there. I think there's the couple key takeaways I would have from that, right? Be creative in how you retain folks. And like you're saying with the golden handcuffs part, one thing I wanted to double click on there though, Ali, you mentioned kind of at the outset, you've got, maybe folks that are bad out on the market right now. You've got folks that are okay and folks that are good. You mentioned that hiring and retention is really the biggest challenge, or it's a super common challenge that you see. What are organizations doing wrong on the hiring front that results in employees coming in that maybe aren't the right fit for an organization? Is that a common thing, or are they just bringing in good people and not setting them up for success? Because I feel like that changes a lot when you go from 5 to 25.
Yeah, no, I think it's both, but usually you don't have that second problem if you've solved that first problem, meaning you're just introspective enough to where if you're solving the first problem, you're probably going to solve the second problem as well. But if you have one problem, you probably have both problems. So let's talk about the first problem, which was hiring the right people. I think it was Jeff Bezos that said, I'd rather interview 50 people and not hire a single one rather than hire the wrong person. and hiring the right people is so important. And again, you can do everything right, and it still is a little bit of a crapshoot in certain respects. So what I will say is at least fix the hiring process, right? I mean, we have, we've taken things from top grading, we've taken things from a whole bunch of other different philosophies, but I'll lay out what we tell all of our clients how they should do it, right? So, you first of all, you should have a good and appropriate job posting, because there's a job description and then there's a job posting. Those are two separate things. It's an ad. So your job posting should attract the right types of people. The wrong people should be repelled. The right types should be attracted. So that's number one, have the right job posting. Then number two, always have something inside the job posting that deters away the people that didn't read it, right? Very simple. I'll tell you this much. I don't know hang on. I have seen enough girlfriends apply for their boyfriends, and the first time I'm talking to them and I'm just like, did you even read the job posting? Right? And I'm like, someone else applied for you, right? So I've seen enough of that. So having something in there to make sure that the individual read it. So, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll have to set up a 1-800 number. They'll have to call in and leave a message. What's their phone etiquette like, right? You learn that right away. Then from there, if that passes, then we'll send them a test, like, for BDRs, we'll just send them like, here, write a 3-email sequence. Do you even know how to type, right? And simple things like that. After that, then we'll, if they pass that, we'll do an initial phone screening. They pass the phone screening, just simple questions, learn a little bit about them. And then after that, then we'll send them. We personally, again, like I said, just disclaimer, we are Kolbe and print certified, and that's what we do. So we send a Kolbe and then a print to learn their work styles and then their affective, their motivators. From there, after that, then we do we also do a Wonderlic to just see, do they have the brain capacity to be able to sell what we need them to sell? Because if it's just a simple commodity, you may not need to be a genius, but if it's you're selling into enterprise and you got to work with, CSO and like a whole thing at that C-suite, if you got to sell that, you probably got to be a little bit of a higher acumen. So we do all of that. After that, then from there, then we do an in-person interview. So after all of that, if somebody makes it through all of that process, then from there we can, to a certain degree of reasonability, this person probably is the right person, could be the right person, and then then you can attack the second challenge. I know that may sound like a lot of steps, but if done properly, you can actually go through that entire funnel in 24 hours if you set it up right and if you have the right person. And it is very important to set appropriate expectations with the candidate that we're not messing around here. Like when we send you this test assignment, you need to get it back to us inside of 24 hours. When we send you this Kolbe and this print assessment, you need to get it back to us in 24 hours. Because if you don't, you're not the right person. I don't want someone with a laissez-faire attitude and no urgency to be applying for my sales job. Like, yeah, I'll fill it out when I fill it up. Right. After that, you're going to fill it out now if you want this job. But again, we're not in, it's a buyer's market right now. So we're not in a position where we can kind of do that. So that job ad really needs to speak to that right person and make that person say, yes, I want to work here.
Well, and I think the other part about that too, oftentimes folks, they interview to figure out their interview process, and it's a gigantic waste of time. If you start bringing in, multiple candidates, even for an 8-year and SDR role, if they're interviewing with the manager, VP of sales, maybe a co-founder, maybe somebody on a phone screen, let's call those a half an hour a piece, multiplied by however many SDRs it takes for you to figure out your process. It's madness. It's total madness.
Oh, I agree.
Ali, I mean, I hate to say it, but we're at time here. Really quick before we wrap, just closing thoughts, Ali, for all the folks who've joined us here today.
The only thing I will say is I'm here to help. I genuinely love talking about sales. So if anyone ever has any questions, I will give you my actual email address, not some phony one. So it's Ali, A-L-I, @rosegardenconsulting.com. Shoot me an email, and I'm happy to support and help in whatever capacity. But just don't ask me any technical, nerdy questions like what is the, this, I don't know, man. Like, don't ask me about point decimals and statistics. Like, just ask me a real sales question. That's all I ask.
Ali Mirza, founder at Rose Garden Consulting. On behalf of the 20,000 MSP community members, everybody here who attended, and our folks that are watching the recording later on, thank you so much. This was really, really fun. You brought a fresh perspective to the community that we don't typically see. And I really appreciate you taking some time out of what I'm sure is an incredibly busy day to share that perspective with all of us.
No problem, man. I'm just not sitting here on the Facebook all day long. No, I'm just kidding.
Ali, thank you so much. Stay safe. Everybody take care. Have a wonderful day.